Hello, and welcome to Alienate UK with your hosts, Andy and Nicole. We'll be right back. Please put all questions in caps and start with an emoji.
Let's go. Let's go.
Hello, welcome to Friday's episode of Alienate UK. Nicole will be with me very, very soon. She's just had to nip off and do something, so she is going to be coming on. But I just want to welcome our guest, Paige. Welcome to the show, and thank you so much for coming on.
Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be here, Andy.
Oh, I can't wait. I've been really looking I've looked forward to all of them, but some a little bit more than others, without being too biased. So, so you're out in you up near the Midwest, did you say?
Yeah, I'm up in the Rocky Mountains of the state of Colorado, kind of right behind NORAD and outside of Colorado Springs. So I'm in the Rocky Mountains. It's a beautiful day today. Yeah.
So you were saying, so that's you're going to be talking a lot about the Rocky Mountains because that was where you was brought up around the area and all the stuff that went on. Can you tell us a little bit more about that, please?
Yeah, let's just kind of start at the beginning. And sometimes, when you're doing this for so many years, you forget that there's new people out there that don't know the whole backstory. So, you're familiar with Linda Moulton Howe.
Yes.
Yes. Yep. So Linda Moulton Howe in the mid to late 70s lived out here in Colorado and was an investigative journalist. And she really got her start out here investigating these strange animal deaths. So animal mutilation deaths. And at the time, my mother was dating a gentleman who owned a ranch in Elbert County, Colorado. Now, the ranch itself in Elbert County, it's not in the Rocky Mountains. It's actually on the eastern side of Denver. And so it's very wide open with patches of these ponderosa pines. So we have forested areas and very open areas. And there's a lot of ranchers out there and cattle ranchers. And so I never lived on this property full time. This gentleman named Jack that my mom was dating had 3 sons, and the 2 younger sons lived with us with my mom's boyfriend for 3 years. So to attend a larger school district, because in the little town of Kiowa, it was like a graduating class of 6 or whatever. And so, here I am 9, 10, 11 years old. And I had my big sister. She's there with me. She's 6 years older. So she's in her teenage years. And we're just experiencing strange things. The hitchhiker phenomenon, which I kind of decompartmentalized that. I didn't tie it all together until just a few years ago when, the skinwalkers at the Pentagon came out, and I started realizing that many people experience a hitchhiker effect.
Oh my God. I listened to that on Audible probably about 8 months ago. And it's I've had to listen to it twice because of just how in depth it is and the detail of everything that goes on. And it's not shocking. I won't say shocking, but surprising, I'd say.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. One of the weird things, I was just, I'm a co-host on UAP Studies podcast with Jill Gelmet and Dr. Michael Glosson out of Canada. And we had George Knapp on, and he had just did his series Investigation Alien on Netflix, and that first episode's really good. It's on animal mutilation deaths. So, we were
Yeah.
talking about the Skinwalker Ranch and the hitchhiker effect and all that. And George shared a story of, back when NIDS was investigating the Skinwalker Ranch in Utah, which is almost mirrors the Rocky Mountain Ranch, by the way.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
verbatim. But they were saying that these investigators would go investigate at the Skinwalker Ranch, and their wives would stay back east, and the wives would get the hitchhiker effects happening, all the paranormal kind of things. I'm like, what is that all about? Like, that is just so bizarre to me, that they seem to attach.
Yeah. So do you think because they're back at home and the guys are out doing what they do, that the phenomena kind of knows that they're a little bit vulnerable, shall we say? So that's why they're getting the
Maybe.
attachment.
Yeah, maybe. There's so many, Questions about that.
Yeah.
Back in 2012, when I kind of started my curiosities about this, like so many people, we go through life, right out of high school, I get married, I raise 5 kids. I have 2 grandkids now. And then we go to school and we have our jobs, but all those questions about what was all that weird stuff happening in my childhood at the ranch and all this stuff. So I kind of started in the world of the paranormal, got really hooked on like the show Ghost Hunters, and did a few kind of, at the Stanley Hotel and the St. Augustine Lighthouse in Florida, went on a few adventures with the Ghost Hunters, those paid things that they do. And that was a lot of fun. Yeah. And then I was watching, so many of us like gobble up books and documentaries and all the television shows and stuff, Ancient Aliens and on and on and on.
Yeah.
And I was watching one of those shows and I learned about MUFON, the Mutual UFO Network. And I thought, I'll check that out. I joined MUFON in 2012, came in as a field investigator and kind of worked my way up to state director. So I was Colorado state director for a while. I since kind of passed the torch on, and I'm no longer with MUFON. I started the Rocky Mountain Ranch research thing. But I'll tell you, it's amazing to me that weird hitchhiker phenomenon, or even the observation of UFOs and UAPs, that you can have groups of people, let's say they're out camping in the spring or summer, and you have certain people that will witness things, and then other people that don't, or other people will bring it home with them and other people won't. And that's always been a question, like, why does that happen? What is that about?
Have you done any research into that? Any studies? And have you got any results as to what it could be?
I mean, I have some theories about that. I'm not saying that this is what it is, but through the years, I've sort of noticed that there's an important piece to I think that number one, we, for whatever reason, humans, are active participants in the phenomena. I found this connection to disassociation, whether it's through a near-death experience, through meditation. A lot of times I talk to people, and including myself, I had a lot of trauma in my childhood. And so I feel like when we, through whatever means, disassociate from our physical bodies and kind of go out into the ethers, we connect into something. And it seems to me that those people that have experienced this disassociation seem to experience and interact with the phenomenon more than those who don't. And of course, you have to be open to it, first of all, because if you're not, you're just going to shut the door on it. So the first thing is allowing yourself to be curious enough to explore these things. And it can be kind of scary, and you have to protect yourself, and you don't know what you're dealing with or who you're dealing with or what you're dealing with. So, a lot of those things. But I have noticed that in talking with so many people that have experiences through the years, that there seems to be that disassociation piece. And then, on UAP studies, we talk a lot about, it seems like so many people that do have these experiences have these commonalities, whether they're artists, musicians, writers, they're all very creative people. And I'm like, what is that? I know the skeptics would say it's because you're all just creative and you're making it all up. But I think there's more to it than that,
Oh, but that's one of the main things that I noticed. The majority of the people that I speak to are 99% of the time a musician.
Yeah, I know.
More than anything else. Mm-hmm. So
are you a musician too, Andy?
No. I'm tone deaf. But I did art and design at college. I did photography. So I've obviously I do the channel and I create my own videos and thumbnails. So I do digital creating now rather than pen and paper. I still do some pen and paper stuff to get an idea of what I want for the next thing, if you know what I mean. So I'm still writing, like sketching stuff and putting stuff down, but probably not as much as what I used to.
Right.
But it's still, like you said, it draws it in. So I would love to know what that connection is.
Yeah,
because
is it
it
a
doesn't
right
seem
brain?
to be anything.
Yeah, I don't know if it's a right brain, left brain thing, or a case at point. So let me backtrack back to how I found out about any. So when we were little, my sister and I and my mom, we were threatened and warned not to talk about what was happening out at the ranch property. So for me, it was this big secret. I never knew anybody knew anything about it. I never knew it was investigated by anybody. And so after I joined MUFON, I'm gobbling up the books like I do. And I bought this book right here, Hunt for the Skinwalker, about Skinwalker Ranch.
I've got it up there somewhere. It's
right. And I started reading in the chapter Other Hotspots, and they start talking about a ranch in Colorado. And I knew the weird family dynamics, and now all the adults in the situation have passed away. So I feel comfortable kind of saying my mom was dating a gentleman who was still married to a woman. And in the Clearview reports, or the APRO reports, which is Aerial Phenomenon Research Organization, she is known as Barbara, but her real name's Betty. Well, she was supposed to be divorcing her husband that my mom was dating. They never ended up getting divorced. Okay. But she was dating another gentleman by the name of John, and who is Jim in the report. So I knew the weird family dynamic. Like there's John and Jim and Betty and my mom and all that stuff. So I'm like, this has to be the ranch of my childhood. It was the 70s. Wow. What can I say? People, free love and all. But anyway, in this book, oh, hi, Nicole.
Hi.
It's nice to meet you.
She's made it.
Meet you. I made it. I'm sorry, I was late, and then the ice cream truck came. It was a whole thing.
Ice cream truck.
Yes.
It's great. Love that. Great memories of chasing the ice cream truck and getting the old push-ups.
Yes.
That's amazing. Well, I was just rambling on about how I learned about the people investigated the ranch in my childhood. It's a lot like Skinwalker Ranch in Colorado.
Yeah.
And in this book, Hunt for the Skinwalker, I learned that there were 3 PhDs investigating the ranch. Dr. Leo Sprinkle, PhD, John Durr, PhD, and Peter Van Arsdale. And so, Dr. Sprinkle's old school. I wrote him a letter and he confirmed, yes, this is the ranch of your childhood. And I think it's important too for your listeners to understand that these strange things that happened on the ranch weren't just on that 60-acre ranch property. It was the whole county of Elbert County, very similar to the Uinta Basin by Skinwalker Ranch. So, and things are still going on to this day, and we have the whole gamut from the hitchhiker stuff, the paranormal, the cryptids, the Sasquatch, the strange hums like the Taos hum in New Mexico, of course, the UFOs and UAPs, going on and off, the strange blacked out helicopter. So there's many things we can cover in this interview. It just depends on what you guys want to talk about. Yeah.
But it's the thing that stands out the most to you, like number one on the list. It's the weirdest thing.
Right. I love that you asked that, Nicole, because there's some topics that I avoided for a while. Like, for example, the animal mutilations. That was a huge thing. I was just telling Andy before you came on that Linda Moulton Howe was an investigative journalist, and she got her start out in Elbert County, including the ranch of my childhood. And, they're trying to figure out all these strange animal deaths, which of course just didn't hit cattle, but horse, like at Contact in the Desert this year, I'll be speaking about the infamous 1967 Snippy the horse case. That really kind of went worldwide. It kind of went viral back in October 5th was the first time it was reported to the papers, but it went viral around the world. And it was really the first time these strange animal deaths were really getting recognized. And that was out here in the San Luis Valley of Colorado. And so APRO, the same organization that researched the ranch in my childhood, also researched the Snippy the horse case. And those files, the APRO files, went missing for over 35 years. And so there's been a lot of misinformation about that case and evidence that really kind of was buried and covered for all these decades. And now David Marler, who just acquired the APRO files, he has the National UFO Historical Records Center out in Rio Rancho, New Mexico, which if you're ever in the States and you're ever in New Mexico, you can go to his website and sign up and visit. You guys would be blown away. It's like original Project Blue Book and NICAP and CUFOS, and now the whole wall's APRO. So what happens was the King family, so Nellie Lewis King, owned Snippy the horse. And the King family, of course, is still out here in Colorado, and they have wonderful events now out in the San Luis Valley. And we just started, working with them. And once we learned the APRO files were back, we made a couple trips down to the record center and went through just stacks of original photographs and documents and audio recordings. And we'll have the new book out in a couple months on Snippy the horse with all the correct data and all new photographs. And like I said, I'll be speaking about it at Contact in the Desert and sharing for the first time, never seen before, pictures of Snippy as a little baby colt and his mother Lady. For a long time, people are like, no, it was Lady. It was Lady. No, Lady was his mother and it was Snippy. So we get to kind of fix some of these, misunderstandings that were going on. And it came from Burl Lewis, who was Nellie's husband. And we think he kind of made up the story to try to make the Snippy the horse go away because it affected his life for all these decades. And he married another woman. I think he just kind of wanted to put all of this behind him. But what happened was it backfired on him because now it's even more like, convoluted. Wow. But anyway, but so yeah, there's definitely, and what's been interesting about uncovering the Snippy the horse documents and really taking a deep dive on that case, there's way more parallels to the Rocky Mountain Ranch than I ever imagined. And back to your point, Nicole, on what are some of my favorite things. So animal mutilations, I kind of went, that's not my specialty. It's like Linda Moulton Howe's specialty. It's Chris O'Brien's specialty, Chuck Zukowski. There's people that really did a deep dive on this. And it really wasn't my interest for a while because still, I have no idea why these animals are being mutilated, right? It's still going on to this day. Yeah. And the other thing I didn't talk about were these strange, mysterious disappearing boxes because it just sounds a little crazy, but as I'm researching the boxes now, we're learning they're showing up all over the place. And that's how it is with so many of these strange, weird phenomena. Like I kind of just focused really on like the strange hums and the bangs a little bit. The Bigfoot I didn't touch for a long time either. My big question was always how much of it was Black Access government projects. That's where my focus started because in the documents, there were like reports of military men and women being on the property. And that was my question. Like, what are they doing out there and what are they covering up? And that's the case too at Skinwalker Ranch and now Mount Wilson Ranch. We know there's that Bob Bigelow connection, a Howard Hughes connection, military connection, these mysterious helicopters and all that stuff. So my focus was kind of there.
I've got a question just because of going in depth and all these different organizations. I don't know if this question is going to get me kicked off, but I'm going to ask it anyway.
Oh boy.
What do you think?
Those.
Do you think BlackRock has got any involvement into what is going on at all these different places of high strangeness?
I do. And eventually, in being the state director for MUFON for Colorado, there were certain people that would just show up out of the blue that were very mysterious in nature. And I was quoted as saying, and I still mean it to this day, it's not that I lost interest in whether we're being visited from, people from other planets, or if UFOs are real or if aliens are real. I became more interested in who are these mysterious people and what is their connection and what is a cover up? Like that's what started interesting me. I'm like, okay, what's going on here? Here's a good case in point. So there's a really interesting, John Schuessler is one of the founding fathers for MUFON. And when he learned of my connection to the ranch, he gave me the original document from the report, which I never knew was investigated, but here I have it in my hand. And in this report, it states that there were 2 interceptors, A-7Ds, that were scrambled out of Buckley Air Force Base, which is here in Colorado. And in Dr. Leo Sprinkle's files, they were in pursuit of a UFO near the ranch in my childhood. And these 2 interceptors crashed, and both pilots eject, and they survived. Okay. And this occurred on November 11th, 1975. Well, what I learned was that the Air Force had another incident that they publicly announced. It was on the front page of all things the National Enquirer. But the military was watching many UAPs, UFOs on radar in Falconbridge, Ontario, in Canada. And they're watching these things for quite some time. They're going from 26,000 feet in altitude up to 74,000 feet straight up. They don't know what these are. So they're watching them go with 25 to 30 nautical miles over the Great Lakes of Michigan. So they decide to scramble 2 F-106 Delta Darts out of Selfridge, Michigan. And of course, the pilots don't ever interact with these UAPs, but it's interesting. So here we have 4 interceptors being scrambled in the United States on this particular day. And I also find out that you guys are familiar with Travis Walton's abduction in 1975.
Yes.
Well,
Yep.
at 12:06 a.m., November 11th, 1975, on the same day, Travis Walton is being returned in Snowflake, Arizona. So here we have 4 interceptors after UFOs. Travis Walton's being returned. And so last year at Contact in the Desert, I was talking to Travis, and I'm like, telling him, like, this is crazy. Were you aware of all this? And he said, you know what else happened on November 11th, 1975? The Edmund Fitzgerald goes down in the Great Lakes, and 29 men go missing. I think since then they've recovered one of the men from the Edmund Fitzgerald. So these 4 incidents are happening on the same day. So now you fast forward. I am at a conference in Laughlin, and Richard Doty, are you guys familiar with Richard Doty? He is an Air Force disinformation officer that came in 1977. And so I had a couple questions for Richard Doty because I was curious, like, had he heard about the ranch in my childhood, right? I wanted to know, because if so, that kind of goes, well, if you knew about it, then something with the Air Force must be going on, or military wise. And so, and I wanted to know if he was familiar with the ranch and these 2 A-7Ds that crashed. And he told me he said, yes, that they were aware of the ranch in my childhood, which is kind of suspicious. But he told me to send a FOIA about this crash. So I sent a FOIA, and I get the report back, and a lot of it is heavily redacted out. No surprise there, right? I'll give you an example. But there were a few suspicious things in this report. First of all, it says that the pilot, that supposedly it was a pilot and an instructor and a student, okay? And they were just doing a training mission over residential neighborhoods in Elbert County. And it says that the instructor misidentifies the rotating beacon of another aircraft, but never explain anywhere that there was another aircraft in the vicinity. It never identifies the other aircraft, even in the radio transcripts. And then it goes on to say 8 of his cockpit instrumentations go out. Yeah. And we've heard this in other reports as well. And so that's unusual. And they also had 218 live rounds of ammo on board. So, here I have a report saying they were actually chasing a UFO. And here we have, documents that his panel is going out and all these weird things, and they end up crashing. So it's very, very interesting indeed.
See, the bit that got me on that was he didn't recognize another aircraft.
Right. And his
trained pilot, he must have had at least 1,000 hours flying experience. You're going to know what's in front of you, what's at the side, wherever. You're going to recognize different objects and stuff. So
That's for sure. And also
flag.
during the same time, I mean, this is the height of the animal mutilations. This is the height of Linda Howe being out there. They actually have so much activity going on with these strange blacked out copters and everything else. And, you know, we had the Colorado Bureau of Investigations involved, and the governors involved in all this stuff. And even the Air Force and NORAD were involved. We have notes from them. But they put a no-fly zone over the whole county for a while. So this is going on during the time they're putting a no-fly zone over. So, you know, something is happening, you know, and even in Dr. Leo Sprinkle's notes, it says that the Air Force head has a directive for the sheriff of the town. There was a sheriff by the name of George Yarnell, and there was a undersheriff by the name of Bill Waugh. And they had a directive from the Air Force head to handle UFOs and Bigfoot.
Very
What is that?
specific.
Yeah,
Isn't
and
it?
the fact that they even
Things like-
acknowledge that,
Right.
crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not go and check out any unusual activity. It's UFOs and Bigfoot.
Mm-hmm.
It's
My name.
it's too direct.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and these Bigfoot, you know, again, Nicole, like what I said, I kind of avoided certain aspects to this because it's just like kind of so much. But you know, it seems, and even on that first episode of Beyond Skinwalker that I did, that was my first time being back on the ranch since I was a kid. And I was a little panicked because I had not met the family that lives there now in person. What the story is that before COVID hit, I had left a note in their box because they have a gated property, and I left a note in their box explaining who I was, you know, and I wanted to meet them for lunch and share all this information with them because I had no idea if they were experiencing things or if they knew the history of their home, like their property. And I didn't want to freak them out about it or scare them or say it was anything bad or anything. And so then COVID hits and shuts us all down. And I didn't want to like just tell them all this information over the phone or on Zoom or whatever. And I get a call from the History Channel, you know, talking about, you know, we have this new series, and would you be willing to meet the family for the first time with cameras rolling? I'm like, oh my gosh, can you imagine the anxiety? Because I had no idea if what they experienced, if stuff was still happening. I mean, I was just kind of going in cold. So I'm pulling in on my Jeep and the sun's going down. It's like sunset. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I want to get on the property before it's dark. A, because I'm freaked out and scared anyway. And secondly, I wanted to see, you know, orient myself and see what I remembered. But what's interesting is, and what we talked about a little bit before, Andy, is Greg, the father, you know, he's a hardworking guy that likes to build and tinker on cars and, you know, work the ranch and all this stuff. He hasn't experienced very much. He's seen some unusual lights, but other than that, not so much. But the daughter and the mother, and unfortunately, Chris, the mother, passed away right after season 1. But they had experienced some of the similar things I had as a child, which are these shadow figures, you know, and the sense of being watched and more of the hitchhiker kind of stuff. And the daughter was, you know, grew up on that ranch property. So we kind of bonded right away. I'm like, oh my gosh, that happened to me too. Yeah. But with the Sasquatch, so I was taking the film crew behind the ranch house in the Ponderosa Pines, where I had experienced in the daytime this strange levitating box that was there. It made this weird like bee hum sound, and Jack's yelling at me and the younger son to get in the truck. We turn around and the box was gone. So I had this weird encounter with the box that many other adults had this similar experience with the box. Even the undersheriff Bill Waugh had an experience. Him and his posse sheriff encountered the box. And he said it was as if the box in the tree went underground, as if it was like a portal or a dimension under the ground. So I'm taking them to show them where I experienced this strange box as a kid. And it's snowing hard. It's blizzarding hard. You can see it on the episode. And right in front of us, there's bipedal, one in front of the other, footprints that come out of nowhere. And then they disappear under the ground for maybe 12 to 15 feet, reappear, and then disappear again, as if something comes up, walks, goes, comes up, walks, and disappears again.
Wow.
You know, I mean, and I was so excited that they caught that on film. You know, I mean,
Yeah.
and that's something that couldn't have been faked because it was coming down so hard. Our footprints were getting covered really fast with the snow. I
Yeah.
mean, it was just bizarre. And it made me really think and ponder, what are these Sasquatch beings? Are they connected to the UFOs? Are they interdimensional? Are they, you know, in a lot of these high strangeness areas, we have water connections. Where the ranch of my childhood sits, we have two major aquifers that come together right there at the ranch. I'm like,
Right.
are there
Yeah.
caverns or tunnels or something underground that they're living underground? I don't know. It's a question I have.
Yeah.
So what do you think?
With these, oh, just sorry, just
Go
to say, with the footprints, they must have just happened. If
Mhm.
your prints are getting covered while you're there, so it's literally it's been and gone in seconds of you getting there.
That's right.
Wow.
That's a wild thought to be like,
Wow.
it was just a couple steps ahead of you.
Yeah, and what
Yeah.
else? You know, that the next day we had off filming. We had a day off filming, and I'm staying in Castle Rock, which is by these great outlet stores, right? Outlet stores that you have all the good things. And I was freezing. I was underprepared, so I'm like, I'm going to go shopping. My daughter's going to meet me, so my daughter comes down, and we go have lunch at Red Robin to grab a burger and to go shopping for, you know, snow pants and everything because I didn't want to freeze the next night. And we're sitting having lunch, and my shoulder started bothering me. I'm like, oh my gosh, something's wrong with my shoulder. And go back up to my room. My daughter looks, and I had this mark. It looks like a radiation burn on my shoulder that had happened that same night of those footprints. It was blistered. It was hot to the touch. If you go to my YouTube channel, Rocky Mountain Ranch Research with Katie Paige on YouTube, I have an episode and you could see that picture of the mark. And immediately I told the film crew for Beyond Skinwalker.
Wow.
They documented it, filmed it, had the med people look at it. And my daughter documented it and everything. But I'm like, that had to have happened that last night on the ranch. And I had many layers of clothing on. So I didn't lean up against anything, you know, and I've had people like, oh my gosh, it's something bad or negative, but I didn't feel that way. I felt like, since, you know, I was taking the film crew back there, I kind of tripped over the barbed wire and fell like in the snow, like forward, and my jeans were all soaking wet. I'm like, maybe it was just trying to help me up, like, get up, you know, keep going. Yeah, it was pretty wild. That whole experience. There was so much that happened on that episode, both episodes, actually, season 1 and season 2. Season 3 is coming up. That didn't even make the episodes. And there's certain things they didn't even talk about on the episodes. I think because when you put together a TV series like that, especially when it comes right after the Skinwalker Ranch series, they have to tell a cohesive story. Like, you know, the rockets and the thing. So they didn't even like touch on the boxes. They you know, we had David Morehouse come in and do the biggest remote view in the history of the United States there. And they only did a little bonus clip for season 1. They brought him back for a short time on season 2, but there's just this huge body of work that David Morehouse did, the remote viewer, that just, they couldn't touch it because it's just overwhelming amount of data.
Wow. So it seems that you've gone back, like, to reconnect with it, and because of what happened to you growing up there, and this family that's on there now, with the daughter having the same kind, or literally the same stuff as you, do you think that you both being there at the same time has, I suppose, influenced what the activity that's going on, and that's why you got the results that you got?
I don't know. That's a good question. And that's, you know, that sense of being watched. I don't know if you two have ever experienced kind of that sense of being, there's no other way to put it, but a sense of being watched. It had been with me for decades. I kind of started losing that a little bit, maybe in my 40s, my mid 40s. But boy, when I went back on that ranch, oh, there it was again, you know, and Nicole experienced that as well. And, you know, I didn't know if you guys seen the episode, I get on this ham radio and I'm like, hey, remember me and my sister and the boys? And the thing responds. The crystal radio responds, or the house responds. What they don't show on that episode is I repeated it 3 other times. And then Jer's trying to repeat it and no response. It only responded when I did it. And then in Oh, I can't really say. Well, I can give a little teaser. This next one, my sister comes back with me on the ranch, and they repeat it with her to see what would happen. I can't give away what happens, but it begs a question like, why does this seem to remember, I guess, is remember us and not and interacts with us, but not others? So that begs a question: is the phenomena, is it the land? Is it the people? Is it a combination of both? What is that, and why is that? I'm not so sure.
See, I would almost say like that mark on you specifically is like the ranch or the phenomena or whatever, being like, hey, we recognize you and I'm going to make sure that you know it.
Yeah, it could be that. I mean, it felt that way, and it didn't feel, I'm uncomfortable at night and it's a little scary, but I don't feel like whatever is around me is bad. In fact, I feel quite the opposite most times. I feel often guided and protected. So I'll just put that out there. That being said, I would tell listeners and people that want to kind of delve into all the strange world, I guess, to be careful because we don't know what we're dealing with. And I have people write to me, and we'll be careful of the tricksters and people, whatever the phenomena is, could be disguising itself as something good when it's something bad. But I worked with the ex-paranormal rangers, John and Stan, and they kind of gave me good ways to protect myself. And I do that. I try to ground myself and protect myself and have good intentions and think positive things, because I don't want to bring anything negative and scary home with me. No. Although, it doesn't matter where I am on the globe. Whatever this is does seem to tag along. let itself know,
Yeah, it seems like people can be interested in this, people can want to do this, and they go out and get absolutely nothing. And then there's some people who, just have experiences, almost like, they're chosen.
Yeah. I kind of stay away from that word chosen, but I don't feel any more special than anybody else. And in fact, I'm like, sometimes I wish I didn't have all this, although it does make for an interesting life, right?
Yeah.
We have a lot to talk about. How's the weather? Yeah. Well, I have something to tell you. But even in talking with, I went out and did an interview with the Millers, who have a cattle ranch in Trinidad, Colorado. They're also on Beyond Skinwalker. And I did a couple interviews with them that you could see on Rocky Mountain Ranch Research on the YouTube channel. The first episode was important to me because I wanted to talk about the hitchhiker phenomenon more than the cattle mutilations. And it was interesting. They've had many of the hitchhiker stuff too. I mean, like they were telling me they had a butcher knife just fly off their kitchen and fly across their, I'm like, holy moly, that's scary. And they'll have their, hear conversations in the living room and things like this. But they said something to me that really stuck with me in that it seems like a lot of these ranchers that are having the mutilations will also have the hitchhiker stuff, and they feel like they're connected to the phenomenon because of their person, and they're getting hit with the mutilations. And there's other ranchers or neighbors that don't have the mutilations that aren't connected to it at all. So it kind of goes hand in hand with the mutilations too. And I'm like, I never thought of that before, but that's what they've noticed through all these years is, it is sometimes the people, the ranchers themselves.
Yeah. See, this gets me as well, just changing genre a little bit. It's like you get, say, a row of terraced houses and there's like second or third one in and it's haunted. And there's poltergeist activity and there's noises and it's banging. And the houses either side, absolutely nothing. Why is it just a 2-foot thick wall, big cavity that's stopping anything happening from the building next to it? Surely the energy just can't be concentrated. Well, it could be. I don't know. How is it just concentrated in that one area? And is it control? Is there some sort of control on it for it not to go anywhere else?
Yeah, I often have the same questions as you do. It's, and even within here's a good example. So my sister, we're very close, but she has chosen, she she's interested in the topics, and she's had her experiences on the ranch. And I said, you need to come do this episode with me. I want you to face it. I want you to go back there and face it. She was, 15, 16, 17 years old and had her own experiences there. We've had shared experiences there. And I said, besides, when we're in our 70s and 80s, it gives us something to talk about. Remember when we went, but I'm glad she went, because she was remembering things that she had suppressed, but she has approached this very differently than I did. Well, number one, she does radio in the United States. So she kind of is in the media world, and you know how they are in the media. They like to ridicule you if you're interested in things. But she also doesn't want the hitchhiker stuff. Like I don't want ghosts. I don't want the stuff. I just don't want it. And so she doesn't necessarily get it, where I'm more open to it. And I'm like, all right, I'm okay with it. Go ahead and fly the picture off my wall. I like, which makes me really wonder, are we active participants in it? Like there's, are we, like Thomas Campbell's work, he did the Big Toe books, and he thinks we're living in a simulated world, right? We're a simulation. And to me, that would answer everything. If we're in a video game world, in my game, things are flying all, I'm living in this weird world, and her reality, not so much. And to me, that kind of makes a lot of sense. What do you guys think of that virtual?
Yeah, I totally get that. Yeah. Because it's like you're the main character of your own game, movie, universe, and everyone else is an extra. That's how I see it. Someone said it to me, probably I think it was last year before, and that's what it seems to be. You're your own main character, and even though you're thinking you're making these decisions, maybe you're not. Maybe they're being programmed into you, and then you're doing what you kind of think you've got free will, but you've not, because you don't know any different. I'm not saying it is that, but it's
right. It could be. It's a possibility.
It's like anything else, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely interesting, because then you think like all these NPCs in the world, and all of a sudden exist out of nowhere, and then you're seeing them everywhere. I'm like, if you've lived down the street from me, wouldn't I have seen you a million times before this?
Well, this is right. I've got another fit. I don't know if it's the Mandela effect or anything like that. I'll just tell you quickly. I leave for work Monday to Friday, the same time every morning, within, say, a minute. I do the same route every single, unless there's been an accident or roadworks or something. There's a couple of diversions I can take, but 99% of the time I do the same route. I never ever see the same vehicles or the same people in the morning. I might see 3-4 cars, a couple of vans as I'm driving along, like pulling out on the estate where I live and the other roads. And I'm looking out. I'll like actively remember specific vehicles, and I'll look out for them the next day. Nothing. Why is nobody else traveling to work at that time, yet everyone's traveling to work at that? I leave at 7 o'clock in the morning, literally between 6:58 and 7:01. It's usually bang on 7 o'clock. I sit in the van and get warm first. So as soon as it's 7, and they start, like Truman Show,
like the Truman Show.
Yeah.
I don't know,
but
you would think you would see other like doing the same routine, because we all are programmed. I think if we are computers and we're zeros and ones and we have to rerun the same program, it makes a lot of sense that we're in autopilot a lot of the time, where you're running that same program. You get up in the morning, you do your coffee, you go to work at the same time, because it's easy for it to download. It doesn't have to render it again. But then when we're seeing UFOs or Bigfoot, that's a whole new render. And maybe once it's rendered, that's why oftentimes people who encounter these things will have repeat encounters, because it's already rendered in their game. I don't know. I don't know if this is the answer. I'm like my youngest son. He's like, Mom, don't even go down this whole thing. No.
Just don't bother. But this is the other thing. So going to school, I grew up in a different part of the UK. I was in the northwest, in Manchester, whereas now I'm just north of London. But going to school, I'd see the same cars, the same people going to work, same people getting on the bus, and you'd know who you was going to see. But I think, like you've just said, I think it's just triggered something that the more open you are and the more experiences you have with the phenomena, it's going to change it, because then if it is a simulation, that's going to be up in its ability so that you don't recognize everything that's going on. So could that be the reason why you're not seeing these same people? I've worked at this place now. It's 6 years this year. I've literally done the same route. Well, we moved from one side of Northampton to the other. I've done the same route now for 2.5 years, and I never, ever see the same vehicles.
So weird.
I might see the odd one here and there, but it don't make sense.
You know those glitch in the Matrix videos where like the plane is stuck midair or like the birds stop flying? I find those fascinating.
Yeah.
That's wild.
Yeah.
And you know what it also would explain? It would explain why. And I've always asked this question too in my research and stuff. Like, so for MUFON, I was the lead team leader for what they called the Mars program. So before reports were digitized and put into the case management system online, it was all done old school on paper. So we needed a team of redactors that redacted sensitive, information, names, addresses. Basically, if you can track the person, it comes out. Well, in reading all these reports, you see so many, and going through all these old books and magazines, you see so many different reports of different shapes and types of craft, different types of ETs. And in my case, the Tubi guys, as Paul Giamatti labeled them after I did an interview with him. And I'll show you what was in Dr. Leo Sprinkle's files on the ranch. Hold on, let me find my little sheets here. So these guys, I didn't see these guys, by the way. These are what was in the original reports. But these guys, with these tubes.
Oh.
Isn't he sad looking? He's kind of pathetic.
Does look sad.
He's
What's
like
wrong
kind of,
with him?
I don't know.
Aw.
But we call him the Tubi guy now. And he's got the wrinkles on his forehead and around his lips and his eyes and all that stuff. But so, this is an unusual being, but people see different crafts, different ETs. And if we're in a simulation, this would explain why people see different types of things. Maybe, it's just in their game and not somebody else's. I don't know.
Yeah, well, that's if the play. Yeah, I was going to say, if the player's creating the game like SimCity, you're creating it as you go.
Right.
It's not already laid out. It's not like a platform game, like say Tomb Raider, where you've got to do the same tasks to progress to the next level. This you are literally building it as you go. And if it doesn't work, you can delete it or it breaks. You can change it or open a new setting and start again. So that's my goal in life, is to figure out how we can control the game. I think that's anybody. Like if you go, like maybe that's what the Masons and the the Templars. Maybe they know that with their mana and all that stuff. How can I get the winning Powerball ticket? that's what I want to know. Yeah.
Anyway, but here's where this gets glitchy, and maybe. I don't know. It gets deep. We could go like deep down the rabbit hole, right? So
yes,
with Colorado MUFON, I was the guest speaker coordinator. I invited this gentleman by the name of Sean Bartok, who wrote a book called Flashbacks about his encounters on his ranch property here in Colorado. Never met the guy, didn't know anything about him, never read his book. I'm just sitting in the third row watching his PowerPoint presentation on the screen, and up pops this ET that him and his family encounter on his property, which I find out is 14 miles away from the ranch of my childhood. Okay. And this is what he sees. Now he says these tubes come out. Now look at the similarity between these two. Yeah. My jaw was on the floor. And let me show you with the guy with the tubes out. 14 miles away. We didn't know each other. And this is what he draws. So how does that work? Where's my other drawing of him? Because he says the tubes in the neck come out. Oh, I don't have it right now. I don't know where it's at. Probably in this stack of papers. Hold on. I have too many things on my desk right now. But anyway, So how do you describe? I mean, how do you explain that. I don't know. It's very, very strange. And
Yeah.
here is the sketch of the Sasquatch that was seen on the ranch. This was in the files as well. This guy right here.
Oh,
And when
See,
I was a
that-
kid,
eyes are
Yeah.
creepy.
yeah. When I was a kid, my mom called them white fuzzies because they were gray. They had like gray hair. And what's interesting,
Yeah.
Bob Solis was telling me about the men stationed in Malmstrom at the time. And they were giving these guys, they were claiming to see these Sasquatch up in Montana. And they were given the airmen and women lie detector tests and stuff. And they had a sketch of the beings they were seeing up there in Montana, almost identical to these guys. So I'm like, are they connected to the craft? And I kind of think so. I have a theory that the Sasquatches, at least at Rocky Mountain Ranch, have something to do with the animal mutilations as well as the boxes. Yeah, because when I was interviewing people that had animal mutilations, one of my witnesses lives in Wyoming now, but she got married right out of high school. They lived in Elbert County, very near to the ranch of my childhood in Rocky Mountain Ranch, and they had hundreds of acres in Rama, Colorado. And her husband was on horseback checking the cows for calves, comes across a dead calf. Okay. And it had 4 cuts in a perfect square with the top of the fur removed, but the calf was dead. So he gets on his horse, goes and gets my witness, Sheila. They go back in the pickup truck. She said it took them about 20-25 minutes to go back. By the time they got back, that calf was mutilated, cauterized, blood drained, organs removed, no tracks. This was miles off the county road, no sound, no helicopter. They felt watched, and they said it was very eerie, scared them to death. And they have the photograph. So she's like,
wow.
got in touch with me on Facebook and said, you're not going to believe this. I have the photograph of the calf. And she also had a photograph of a calf where a coyote jumped on its back and just started. I mean, they just tear at the animal. They don't cauterize and remove an organ and all that stuff. So that to me is a compelling animal mutilation case because it's like they interrupted it while in progress. You know,
Oh, that's a creepy thought. Because then, like, whatever did it is sitting there probably watching them.
Yeah.
Waiting for them to leave so they can. Oof.
Exactly.
Yeah,
that's what they
carry on.
said. That's what it felt like. Like it was like eerie. They felt like they were being watched. And it terrified them quite literally. And same with like the boys from, the ranch of my childhood. All of the boys are still alive. They all moved out of the state of Colorado, and they don't want anything to do with any of this because it terrified them so bad. Where me, I think the reason I'm able to do the research that I've done is because I was sort of removed from it. I lived 45 minutes away from the ranch and just visited on the weekends, and we would drive the boys back to see their mom and stuff like that. So I wasn't like in it all the time. Had I been, I don't know if I could have even revisited. I would have been too afraid to do that probably. So it makes sense that they're like, we don't want anything to do with that. And put that behind us, move on with our lives and have a normal life.
And also, as someone younger, they're probably just used to, you grew up with that happening and you were younger. People who are older kind of process it more as it's happening. It's like, wait, that's not right.
That's a really good point. That is a really good point because even like, you talk about people that are kind of have these encounters or experiences, and oftentimes these are very intuitive people, where they're more in tune. We talked a little bit about that before you came on, Nicole, about having, this artistic sense, musicians, artists, very people that can disassociate, things like that. And it would make sense to me that, where was I going with this? That I just lost my train of thought.
Talking about children.
Oh yeah, that like for me, like experiencing things, like I just thought everybody was that way, and it took me a long time to realize that not everybody was that way, or was intuitive. But I also think that trauma piece played a role in that intuitive. So if you talk to children or adults that had childhoods where you had, like in my case, sorry dad, but an alcoholic father who was very violent. I had a half brother who burnt down houses and was very violent. So as little children, we need to be able to read which dad would come in the door. Is it going to be the nice dad that plays games with me, or is it going to be the violent dad who had one too many drinks and is going to go ballistic. And when you're dealing with that kind of a life, you do get intuitive and you learn to read people's faces and people's energies and things like that. And having growing up with all these weird things, you just kind of think that's normal. So much so that in 1977, during the height of the ranch of my childhood, the movie Close Encounters of the Third Kind comes out. And there's animal mutilations in that film and all these strange things. And I thought it was like a documentary. Like I looked at it that way. You know, I was like, oh yeah, this is normal. This is what we're living and experiencing. But I didn't realize the rest of the world saw it as this great sci-fi film. I'm like, oh. So there's that. So yeah, I do think that trauma disassociation piece, and we play a role in it. I just think that's really important, and that's kind of where all my research is led after all this time, after all these years. Like, oh, this makes a lot of sense.
No, just with you saying that, if nobody was open to the phenomena, then in reality it wouldn't exist, because
that's true.
It'd be closed off to everyone.
Yeah. And you know, I've heard people theorize about that, like why certain people are open to it and it's happening. Well, maybe it's to kind of like open the door for others that don't experience it, because the more we all have this conversation and we talk about it, it may like go, okay, well, let me maybe be open a little bit more to this in a safe way. And you know, and then they start, case in point, Greg from the ranch. So he loses his wife after season 1, and we go visit the ranch. We try to, you know, go and, you know, fly the drone and recreate some of the things they do on the series for ourselves. And since his wife passed, and since he's learned about all this, he's more aware of what's going on. And he's like, oh, well, there was the one time, you know, in the middle of the night, we had the big bright light shine down over the ranch house in my skylights. And we're like, great. That's not normal. Like, you know, so, you know, and things like that, you know, just kind of, he's just kind of casually telling us a thing. And we're like, wait a minute. That's something. So again, it's an awareness. Like anything else, you have to be aware of something to experience it. It's sort of like being the repetitive, you know, signs or symbols or synchronicities in the universe. You know, if you're aware of it, and it's like you're looking, it's like when you buy a new car. We got a new FJ. I didn't used to notice them before, and now all of a sudden they're everywhere. I'm like, oh, there's another FJ. Yeah. That kind of thing.
But it's like, I know there's an experiment. Is it the slit experiment? A silt experiment, where if something's being observed, it changes how it behaves to how it is before it's being observed.
That's right.
Slit.
The slit experience, the particle and the Schrodinger's cat and the particle and the wave and all that. And there's people too that say it's sort of like that old adage, do you hear a tree fall in the forest if you're not there to hear it? Does it actually fall? And you could take that a step further and say, does something exist until we observe it? Maybe nothing exists until we're observing it. You know, I mean, it's kind of wild to think about, but what if that were true?
Because
deep into philosophy, because then it's like, okay, if you saw it but I didn't see it, is it real or is it not real? Because we're looking at the same place and you saw it and I didn't. So but reality is kind of subjective in that way.
So you manifest it, and therefore you create it for everyone else to see. So
right. So let's all manifest something really good. And again, like you just said, Nicole, like we don't always agree. You could take 10 witnesses and they're all going to describe something somewhat differently, because it's all perceived through our own lenses, right? And our own biases. And so, and sometimes they match a little bit, but oftentimes, you know, you might notice A, B, and C, and I'll notice something else, and that it makes going back and investigating these older things a little tricky, because it's hard to you got to go back in time. Like even with the Snippy the horse case, you're looking at 1967. It was a whole different world back then, you know. So you got to go back and put yourself, or try to put yourself to the best of your ability into the shoes of the people then, and what their reality was at the time. So much different than now.
Yeah.
Because with UFO sightings, I would imagine that a lot of influence comes from TV shows and movies, because people will see something and they'll relate it to something they saw on TV or in a movie in their traditional portrayal of aliens or the Greys. But back before that, you may have it described a completely different way. Do you find that in your cases?
Yeah, that for sure I do. And even like the point in case Snippy the horse, I mean, that was mutilations. Like now we know about them, right? We've heard a lot about them, we read about them, but that was like the kind of first, so they didn't have anything to go off of. And it was really interesting to look at the mountain of evidence, and some of which really goes hand in hand with what we were experiencing in the mid to late 70s at Rocky Mountain Ranch. One thing in particular, and it's seen in many different cases around the world even, is a 75-foot diameter circle that was reported at the Rocky Mountain Ranch, where the landing site is, where my sister and I were playing, flipping the Frisbee, and it was dry dirt but wet snow on the outside of the circle. They also had that at Snippy the horse, a 75-foot diameter circle with 5 15-foot circles around that 75-foot diameter circle. So, and again, a case in Oregon, that circle on the ground. So this is what I love as a researcher and an investigator, is to make those connections. Even talking to Paul Sinclair, the strange noises and the hums and the bangs and certain commonalities around the world that we can really put a pin in and go, okay, what's with the 75-foot diameter? Certainly we're all not manifesting that. I didn't know them in the 1967 to manifest a 75-foot in diameter circle on the ground, things like that. And there's a lot of different evidence that on that Snippy case that just mirrors what was happening at the ranch, from the sounds and the hums to the boxes. When I saw that there were reports of these boxes in the San Luis Valley in 1967 that are similar to the Rocky Mountain Ranch, I was mind blown. And then we have the strange box in the 1974 Carl Higdon case out of Medicine Bow, Wyoming. We have Trey Hudson, who has the ranch down south, that encounters the strange box. So these boxes are coming up in cases, So, there's things that make me think, yeah, we could be in this matrix, and we're mad. But then you have things like that. Now, again, here we go down that crazy hole, Nicole, of gets deep in philosophy, but maybe I'm manifesting the circle in 1967. I don't know.
Yeah. Time is a weird loop.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
Simon has a question about the boxes while we're talking about that.
Okay.
He wants to know if the disappearing boxes have a purple glow.
The box that I witnessed was a daytime sighting, and it had like a light glow on the inside, but it was reported in the APRA report of being seen at night. It was reported that these ETs claimed there was supposed communication between these two types of ETs on the ranch, and they said these boxes were lethal. And I do believe they mentioned like a purplish glow, a light glow from within these boxes, but they made strange noises. They said the ETs said these boxes were lethal. The two types seen on the ranch were these the 2B guys that I just showed you the picture of, which to me seem a little more robotic and AI in nature. And the other ones reported on the ranch were the blonde, blue-eyed Nordic type beings. And it said in the report that they were in conflict with one another. And I got thinking, what if the conflict is about where our humanity is going in connection with AI? Maybe that's part of the whatever is happening. And basically in the report, it says, that night, that scary night where it kind of threatened and warned us not to talk about what was happening on the ranch, we were there with my mom, my sister. It was the boys' mom's birthday. The adults are in the front room of the ranch house playing games and doing what adults do. Me and my sister and the 3 boys were hanging out in the boys' bedroom. And that hum sound started going off. It's a very low-pitched, like, and sometimes it would get so loud you couldn't hear yourselves talk over it. At that time, all the power in the house goes out. So you know how that is when you're kids and the power goes out and you hear that hum, and you're at a freaky ranch house anyway, this old dilapidated ranch house where all these crazy things are going on. So we're freaking out, flashlights, get the candles, get the flashlights, da, da, da. At that point, the brightest light I've ever seen comes through the boys' window. It was really bright. That lasted for a little while. And at that point, this orifice sound, like it came from every part of that ranch house. And the reason I know verbatim what it says is because it was reported in the original report. And when I read that, I was on the phone with my mom and my sister, just like, you're not going to believe what I just uncovered. But it basically said, attention, we have allowed you to remain. We have interfered with your lives very little. Do not cause us to take action which you will regret. Your friends will, that's us, will be instructed to remain silent concerning us. That's what it said. And I just remember the adults going, like, trying to figure out, where did that come from? They're checking the stereo equipment, the TV, all this stuff. So now fast forward, as a researcher, about a year and a half ago, I started like going, okay, I'm going to try to recreate the sound of that. It sounded very like mechanical sounding. And I came across a video on YouTube called Plasma Ball Technology. And Plasma Ball is where they can pipe human sounding voices out into the field. And it replicates a human voice. It sounds a little electronic, like what I remember. And when I played that back, it made the hairs on my arm stand up. I'm like, that's the sound we heard. So was the military out there messing around with laser technologies, plasma ball technologies, and who knows what else? There's reports of them bringing vagrants onto the property, and homeless people, and experimenting with legal LSD. John Duke came from San Francisco. We have reports of soldiers coming from Fort Carson. Warren, with his last name redacted out, visits the ranch, felt something wrong, wouldn't go towards the woods. Something made him walk towards the woods, would release him. He would run back to the ranch house, and this did this to him 5 times. Was that like a MK Ultra kind of thing, right? Yeah. I mean, that property sat vacant for 10 years. If the military wanted to use it as a testing ground, they could have just bought it. But I think John Duke, who claims he was with Air Defense Command, comes from San Francisco, buys the ranch, and starts experimenting with legal LSD and different things like that. And what's fascinating, after Contact in the Desert last year, we stopped and interviewed a family whose father just passed away, and he was deep in the CIA, and they owned a lot of the property over Dulce Bays. And she was saying that her father and the CIA, they were experimenting with like certain drugs, like a cocktail of different hallucinogens, and they called it FM, which is freaking magic. And I think John at the ranch was part of that program. So this is all part of kind of what I'm uncovering there. I think a good vast majority of some of the things that were happening were government experiments. And I think it spread out into the county with other unsuspecting participants in the program. But it also doesn't explain the hitchhiker stuff. It doesn't explain the shadow big beings in the room, or the paranormal types of things, or, all of that stuff. So I think both things were happening at the same time. Maybe their experiments and what they were doing opened the door to the other stuff. I don't know, or vice versa, chicken or egg. I'm not sure which.
Yeah.
Do you think there's something special about that property, the way that, Skinwalker Ranch, there's all this electromagnetic things going on? Do you think there's anything physically special about that property?
Yeah, that's one of the very first things I looked at. It were all the different property, like, Marley Woods, and then Sedona, the Bradshaw Ranch, and the Blind Frog Ranch, and Skinwalker Ranch, and Elbert County Ranch, and these locations. I'm like, what could they possibly have in common? Is it the property itself? And the vast majority of them, there's a few that are little outliers, but the vast majority of them ping the charts of being highly magnetic. So they're the lightest pink, and even in the San Luis Valley, Snippy the horse, there's a lot of magnetic anomalies there. They almost all have water connections. So whether it's aquifers underground, or lakes, rivers, or streams, so there's a water connection. And then there's the high magnetism. And then they have very similar geological elements as well, whether it's quartz crystal, silver, gold. San Luis Valley is just like a quartz crystal, wonderment. So even with the paranormal stuff, like at the Stanley Hotel in Estes Park, Colorado, we have the water, the high magnetism, and the crystals, and is that causing the hotel to be more paranormally active? And I think the answer to that is yes. Now, why that is, and then you throw in the human, right? And some of us are reading energies and things more so than others were dialed in or tuned in a certain way, which would explain why some people are interacting more with the phenomena than others are. And it's just kind of this magical combination. Now, is the magnetism on the high magnetism allowing the phenomena? Are they interested in those locations because they're getting something from there? Or is it just we're able to interact and see it more because of that? I don't know which it is, but there's certainly, they do have that in common for sure. And is that why the military's, looking at these locations as well? In the San Luis Valley, I know they've used that area for many decades to train the NASA astronauts for moon missions, because there's a lot of volcanic rocks and volcanoes that are very similar to the atmosphere, of the moon surface. So they have done that out there. And then comes the questions of like underground tunneling and things like that. Is that connected? I don't know.
It's all fascinating.
They just
more questions.
Yeah, there's a lot going on in like these. I know they're not small areas, but they are very condensed. So there just seems to be a lot of government and non-government activity for there to be nothing happening. Yeah.
And in my research too, because like I said, that was one of the questions, like which came first, military involvement or the phenomena, right? Chicken or egg. And in researching the property of my childhood, there it was known as the Mulligan Homestead. And then in folklore, it's known as the Clearview Ranch. But so I was researching the Mulligans, and I went down to the Historical Society, and I was trying to dig whatever papers I could find on it.
Yeah.
And there was a gentleman by the name of Dick Mulligan who was born and raised on that property. And later in life, he became a caretaker for the Winter Park Ski Resort here in Colorado. And it says, Dick Mulligan, he was an Irish man born and raised in Kiowa, Colorado, and he was known for having the gift of gab and bold exaggeration. And I got to thinking, I don't think he had a bold exaggeration or storytelling. So he had this reputation as that. And I think he was just trying to tell people what was happening on the ranch. And people were like going, Dick, you're such a storyteller, which would say to me the phenomenon way predated the military's presence. And even talking with neighbors and interviewing neighbors, they had seen orbs of light and craft and strange things happening on and off that property for years before the military ever showed up. So there you have it.
Yeah. We have a bunch of questions.
I would love to answer them. I like questions.
Right. Shall I do the first one?
Mm-hmm.
Right, so this is from Sober Carper, and he's asking, hi, Katie, did you hear or experience any instances where people, not cattle, were being injured?
Yeah, and that's a topic, again, people don't like to touch on the human mutilations, but on the dark web and other places, I've seen people share photos that are pretty darn gruesome. And unfortunately, it does mirror and mimic animal mutilations where you'll have a human with an eye missing. And, there's one really graphic photo of a woman in a seatbelt in a vehicle mutilated like an animal. I mean, it's just horrible. It's horrific. Ooh. And I know people in the day, that's why the governor got involved in the Bureau of Investigations, because people were arming themselves because of all these animal mutilations. And they were really terrified of that they were going to go to humans next. And, as far as injuries, of course, the radiation burns and you get the dizziness and the paralysis and the sickness and things like that. So people are being injured as well. But they were so afraid of this going to humans that the Cattlemen's Association actually set a $10,000 reward to catch the perpetrators of these mutilations, which back in 1976, 1977, $10,000 is a lot of money. So you had ranchers patrolling the skies all the time trying to cash in on this reward, never to catch anything or anybody, but yeah, for sure there's reports of, and not only that's one side of it. But then you have the other side. If the military is messing around with Black access projects and programs, and they're bringing vagrants and homeless people, and I mean, my half brother was in the state hospital for a while. We know they use people in the state hospitals, mental institutions and stuff to do horrific experiments on. That's a whole other side of human injury that people don't even want to talk about. And it's my belief that a lot of the disclosure that we'll never see is because of that reason, because there's so much that happened that they would be liable for, and they would have to answer for these programs that have affected thousands upon thousands of people. And they don't ever want that to see the light of day.
Because if they did it then, they could still be doing it now.
Oh, I'm sure they are. Yeah. We're being mind controlled all the time.
Oh, yeah.
Definitely.
So,
all right. Heidi has a question. So, Katie, I'm so curious. In your childhood, did you have experiences in an old barn, and had you had some magical boots?
Oh, magical boots. Well, when she said magical boots, I just felt like this magical protection around me. It's just like magical protection. I don't know if that's what she's referring to with magical boots, but on that property, there were many outbuildings, and the creepiest one was this old barn. And that old barn had these, the old barn doors were one, it's like a door that does this. And we would see this Sasquatch type cryptid creature in the barn, near the barn. So the barn for me is like a really scary memory. So yes, the barn is particularly creepy to me. And another thing, Andy, I wanted to mention when you were talking about, these cryptids, there were reports in the report of these large cryptid birds that were seen there, and they described them as phoenixes. Okay. And when we were shooting the rockets for Beyond Skinwalker, the rocket guys are there, and the film crew and everything, and Paul and Andy, and in the tree line, because the littler rockets we did back where I saw the box were kind of poking the hornet's nest. We hear these large bird wings, just like a pterodactyl kind of thing, and we're both like, "What the heck was that?" So much so we're like we didn't see anything, but we definitely heard something very large, bird-like out there. So they were reports of cryptid birds and the cryptid platypus as well.
The cryptid platypus?
Platypus, yeah. And that was reported in the San Luis Valley. Platypus are from Australia. But they're reported out on the ranch as well.
That's like the polar bear from Lost. Have you ever seen Lost?
Yeah.
They're out on like this deserted island, and they just encounter a polar bear because we're doing experiments.
Okay.
So maybe the government put some platypuses in Colorado.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know. It's pretty wild.
In Earth, they've tunneled all the way from Australia. There you go.
Wait, you never know, I suppose.
You never know.
You never know.
All right. Next question is from Daryl, and he's saying, "What do you mean by handle them?" So, going back to when you were saying about the UFO and Bigfoot.
I know. So I flew to Florida, and I did an interview with Bill Waugh's widow, Jean, and his son, Keith, because the undersheriff Bill had passed away. And so I was asking him that very question. What do you mean? What did the Air Force head mean? We will handle. I think what they mean is we'll handle the reports. In other words, these mutilations were occurring so frequently that the Air Force head and directive, and they were basically telling the sheriff, George Yarnell, and the undersheriff, Bill Waugh, who had a map in their office, by the way, of, trying to pin where these mutilations were happening. Because it wasn't just in Colorado. Colorado got hit super hard. Texas was hit really hard. Montana, Wyoming, the whole Midwest of the United States was getting hit hard.
Yeah.
And so mutilation happened in Montana. A mutilation would happen in Elbert County about the same time. But what they were telling them to do is, meaning handle them, is they wanted them to downplay what was happening because people were panicking. People were arming themselves. They were panicking, and they wanted them to okay, we're going to handle this. You're going to downplay them. Don't report them as much. So the truth be told, there was probably hundreds more than the general public. And this is just a little sampling of articles. Hold on, I just had it. I know this is the right here. These are just a sampling of articles from that time of all different activities. And some of these talk about a strange metamaterial that was found on the ranch, and there's photographs of it. And of course, in good old style, Air Force took it. We have no idea what happened to it. And then there was this whole phenomenon of these blacked out helicopters. So there's articles about the helicopters chasing and menacing young kids on this ranch. That was the other question I had for Richard Doty.
Oh.
Why would helicopters be chasing young kids on ranch? If I was a parent, I'd be really angry. And he said, well, it was a diversion. In other words, pay attention to this over here while we're doing something over here, you know? And then there was this whole report right here, the choppers and the choppers, all about the mutilations and the strange blacked out copters that were going on. Just dozens and dozens and dozens of these strange sightings. And it was never solved.
Wow. It's
mind blowing.
Yeah, I'm just trying to put it all together, kind of. But like you said, though,
you do.
Yeah. But like you said, with like we said about the helicopters and like chasing the kids and scaring the kids, I was thinking, why would they do that? It's just a bit sick and twisted.
It is sick and twisted.
Even
a waste of resources.
Yeah, but I didn't even think of it was a distraction as to what was really going on.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean,
see everything, don't they? They don't miss out on anything.
Yeah, no, they don't. And people often ask me, like, you know, about the mutilations. Do you think it's us, them, what, who, why? You know, and I don't have the answers. You know, it's been 50 plus years and we still don't have answers. But I think it's a little bit of both. I think maybe the military was doing some of them, perhaps. I don't know. Some of them are just so bizarre that they can't be explained. You know, cows found in trees and literally dropped from above, just like with Snippy the horse. You can see, and what's cool about the old documents in Apro that I'll be sharing at Contact, you have the original maps and drawings and things, but there were 4 horses on the King Ranch. There was Smokey, a black horse, Sheba, Lady the Dapple Gray, which is Snippy's mother, and Snippy. Well, the week before Snippy was mutilated, Smokey died on the ranch of a supposed rattlesnake bite, which now looking back is not possible because of where, you know, it just is a silly theory. And then we have Sheba, Lady, and Snippy on the pasture, and you can see they hand drew a diagram of how these horses, you see the 3 horses being like corralled in a zigzag pattern like this. And then you see Snippy go in circles like this. Then 25, 30 feet over with no tracks or prints, you can see Snippy is dropped from above because his back right leg is broken, right? So same with cattle that are being mutilated. You can see some of these are dropped from above. Now, sure, maybe a helicopter's picking them up, but these reports, you would hear helicopters. It would fly up dust. You would, you know, so I don't know. It's so strange.
But this is what gets me about the cattle being taken. Surely, most cattle is bred for food. It's farmed. It's not called a farm for nothing. So surely, if it is the government that's doing it, they've got access to as much farmland and cattle as they require. So why would they go out to these different locations unless it's something to do with activity at the location? And they take maybe because they take the main organs, don't they? And as we know, organs is soft tissue. So maybe they're picking stuff up that's inside, like the enzymes or something inside the organs. Maybe there's something in that that's changed because of, like you saying about the magnetism at these different branches.
Yeah, that's a theory. I mean, a lot of
scientific
these have
side to it. I don't know.
Yeah. Are they testing water to the ground? Nuclear sites are usually close by in these areas. We have the Titan missile silos in Colorado. But that being said, I've
Yeah.
heard, they do take, the tongue, the soft tissue, the eye and ear,
Yeah.
the rectal area and certain, but the big thing is they drain the blood from these animals. These are blood, even with Snippy, blood is drained. And then I've heard rumors saying, and we actually had somebody who claimed to have worked at S4 out there, and with the extraterrestrials will absorb the food differently, and they'll rub nutrients on the skin and will absorb it into their skin. And the blood contains, especially in cattle and a little bit in elk as well, because there's also elk that go mutilated, but they have copper in the blood, and that the ETs need copper. So could that be part of it?
Right.
Are they making a food source? Or in the Carl Higdon case, they have these, also one floats these food pills over to Carl Higdon. Are they making food pills out of these organs?
Oh, yeah.
I don't know.
But like I said, but surely they can get as much cattle as they want through government agencies.
Right.
So it must be something to do with what's going on in these specific areas for them to go, because they're not taking all of them. It's like one or two here and there. I know there are accounts of like 20, 30 sheep being killed off for whatever reason.
We had we just had an interesting interview. People ask if things are still going on the ranch, and there's an elk hunter there who lives in Elbert County right now. And he was telling us, and he drew me this sketch. So here's a sketch right here. So he's out elk hunting. He parks his truck, and it's getting dusk, and he's walking back to his pickup truck. And he said this was approximately November of 2021. He said it was 4 to 5 feet in diameter, 6 to 8 feet off the ground. The top was spinning counterclockwise. The bottom was spinning clockwise. There was this red-orange glow in the forest. And he's he's a big, tough guy, right? He's an elk hunter. He's, a firefighter. He's a tough guy. But that particular area, he just didn't like. He's like, it's like Lord of the Rings, Fangone Forest. He just feels uncomfortable there. So we as a team, Rocky Mountain Ranch, goes back there with him to interview him. And right where he sees this craft, which by the way just disappears, made no noise, there's an elk path right under it where it was hovering. Just like with Carl Higdon, are they taking the elk? He witnesses this thing for 15, 20 seconds. It was really quick, but it scared the tar out of him. He hightailed it to his truck and got out of there. But this just, in 2021, this happened to him.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. There's a lot more going on than we're ever going to find out.
Yeah. And if you really want to get into it, like, why don't they just buy them from the government or take them from the government? Maybe it has something to do with like that fear factor, like you produce the adrenaline when you're scared, and regular like farm cattle that are being, I don't think they have that because of the way they process them without being graphic.
I mean, that was a thought, Nicole, I had too. Like, this just didn't affect a few certain people or just the people on the ranch of my childhood, but the whole town. And then you have to wonder how many people are unwitting participants in a grand experiment. I mean, was COVID just a grand worldwide experiment we all just went through? That's a good case in point. Like back in the mid to late 70s, were they just messing with certain counties and small towns to see how people would react under these kind of conditions, and then you tie in the MK Ultra stuff and the fear factor and childhood trauma and all the rest that we know they were looking into. I mean, during 1977, I just put this together recently. I was part of this thing in the Denver Tech Center for this biofeedback program by this doctor named Thomas H. Badinsky, who I find out later started the biofeedback from migraine headaches, which is why I was being hooked up to all these machines supposedly to get a handle on my migraine headaches. But he also worked at Area 51. He has ties to Area 51. And this goes on to become the Gateway Project. So was all that going on there too? There's all these weird connections.
Just everything going on at the same time, isn't there?
Yeah. It's wild.
Because it's like you got like MK Ultra, Montauk, Philadelphia experiment. It's the same people that are connecting each one.
Right.
The
Yeah.
same names keep popping up. So
They sure do. You should have seen downstairs was like a crime scene. I had all the papers of, the aviary group. Why are these people involved? What are they trying to figure out? Like, and maybe Nicole, you're right. It's this big mind control. How do we control the people? How do we control the population? Through fear. And they've done a great job, haven't they, of controlling us through fear.
Yeah. And it's conditioning as well, isn't it? Because once you get you to a certain point, it's like, right, now we've got you there. We need to keep you at a certain level.
Mm-hmm. Don't wake up. Don't recognize your own power, the power of each individual person to manifest really positive, good things. They don't want you to know that, because if we all knew the power we each had, we'd live in a different world that they can't control so easily.
Yeah.
Well, during COVID, the thing that I thought was crazy was like they were pushing the boundaries of what they can control so much. They were literally like, you cannot cross state lines.
Yeah.
And now we're into like all of these like AI cars and self-driving cars. You're not going to have the option if they say you can't cross state lines, your car just won't go.
Yeah, you won't be able to go. Right. You can't even go see your family for holidays.
Yeah.
Yeah. We couldn't go into Wales or Scotland and vice versa. So that's
I couldn't go from New York to New Jersey.
Right. Yeah, I think it was a big experiment. I honestly do. And not a good one.
But then looking at it like that, you're getting these what they call the 15-minute cities or 15-minute towns. So was that like, see how it works, like heading that way, going down that path? But then, like you said before, Katie, disclosure, we're never going to get disclosure.
No, I don't think so.
No, but we're going to get told stuff, and that's it.
Yeah, I have to, just so your listeners know, due to my experiences in my life at the ranch and, the games, I guess, that people have played, I'm not overly trusting of the truth coming out. I feel oftentimes manipulated and played and things are covered up. And so, I take a very skeptical view on trusting what we're hearing. And so much so, even some of the narrative that's out there now, I look at it with a very skeptical eye. Like, why are we being told this? Why now? What is this all about? It feels like a controlled game oftentimes. So if we ever do get the truth, it's going to have to come from them or just your average people like you, not calling us average, but people like us that are out there pushing. Yeah. So.
Yeah.
So we're coming down to the end.
Right. We have one question left, if that's okay, because I know we've all got to shoot off literally straight away. So last question. This is from Shelley. And she's asking, Katie, have you ever come across someone that experienced our company, the deceased, and something else in the same area at the same time, communicating amongst each other?
Kind of like disembodied, like conversations and things like that. Definitely so. I joke sometimes because, when it comes to aliens and UFOs, and abductions and that, I kind of ebb and flow back and forth. Is it real? Is it us? Is it them? Yeah. But when it comes to the paranormal, ghosts and things like that, my mother, who was 92, just passed away this last July. And had many experiences like when my dad passed and others have passed that I cannot deny. So I 100% believe in there's something else after us. And certainly on the ranch and just anywhere really different, here at my house even. I've had a lot of those experiences. So that to me isn't even a question anymore because it's happened so often. So yes.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
No. Can't believe this 90 minutes has gone so quick.
Oh, everybody's crazy.
Is it? Oh. Yeah, I had to reboot my internet earlier. It's just not doing anything.
Oh, are we freezing? It's running. Looks good on my end.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's fine now. It just started glitching a little bit. Right. Well, we are at the end of the show.
Everybody was like...
Yeah, that's a simulation. That's what it is.
That's what it is.
Yeah. So thank you so much, Katie, for coming on. It's been an absolute pleasure having you on here.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for having me on,
Great
guys.
to meet you.
Oh, it's been
very
great.
nice to meet you too. One of these days, I'm gonna make it over there. I hope.
Yes.
Again,
Yeah,
I've been to London
Yeah.
once. It was a quick. We were coming from Italy. We had 24 hours, and we had a wonderful. I guess he was a cab driver, Uber driver, and I'm like, we have a couple hours to kill, and he's like taking us everywhere really fast. Jump out, take a picture. It was great. So I need more time there for sure. So, but I appreciate it.
And, trying to get everyone to come over. We've just go and visit a load of castles. We'll be fine.
It's a dream. We'll have a great weekend, and thanks for thank you guys.
You too. So, right, I'm going to shoot off now because everyone's got loads of stuff to do. We are going to be back on Monday. We are going to be back. It's going to be the normal time difference between the UK and the US. So our clocks go forward on Sunday. So Monday around about 4 p.m. UK time, 11 a.m. EST. We're going to have Bigfoot Dwarf coming on for about an hour. So we're going to be chatting to him. Then on Wednesday the 2nd, we've got Sin Shad Hill coming on. She's going to be talking about what she does. I'm not going to give too much away. You'll have to tune in and watch it. And then on Friday, we've got Frankie Adeo and Mark Anderson coming on. So, and they both do very similar things. So that's it for now. So have a wonderful weekend, everyone. We will see you on Monday. That's it. Anyone got anything to add before we shoot off?
I just want to add, please check out Rocky Mountain Ranch Research on YouTube. It's a new channel, and I'm just trying to get those subscribes, trying to hit that 1,000 mark. If I could get 1,000 by Sunday, I'd be really excited.
Well, I've just subscribed to it.
So Thank you.
You have 956, so you only got to get.
Woo, come on, let's get 44. There.
44. You'll have done it.
Yeah.
Thank you, guys.
Yeah. Right. Thanks a lot. I'll see you guys Monday, if not before. Oh, we're doing the 10 membership giveaway on Monday as well because it's the first. So
cool.
That's it.
Good luck, everybody.
Right. Well, have fun. I'll see you all later. Bye-bye.
Bye.
This episode will also be available as audio wherever you listen to your podcasts, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Podbean, etc., as well as being available on Audible. Thanks for watching. See you next time.
Goodbye. Goodbye.